the other office bearers of the Young India chapter in Kochi, distinguished guests, Justice Santosh Hegde, Admiral Nirmala Kannan. I mentioned them because Justice Hegde's brother was my close friend from Moscow days in the 70s. And Nirmala's sister, whom you all know, Nirupama Rao, has been a colleague in the Foreign Service for many years. So though I am seeing them for the first time, I know the pedigree. Since I'm not a young Indian anymore, in fact, Sreenivasan was surprised when I told him I retired 10 years ago from the Foreign Service.
He didn't tell you what he told me after that.
I can't say. So it is nice to be with young people. That was the secret I told him. He asked me, what is the secret of your looking young? I said, young friends. So it's always good to be with the young people of Kochi. Particularly to talk about a very debated topic, good governance. And when I was invited, I was told that the purpose is basically to have a positive assessment. But the danger of inviting people to speak about good governance in India, the tendency would be to speak about all the ills. So since I was told that that was not the purpose, I was asked to look at the good aspects of good governance. But good governance, that particular expression, is now today like motherhood. Nobody will challenge it. But it would be interesting to recall that this concept was actually devised in order to deny the developing countries certain privileges. I am thinking of my experience at the UN when this concept was introduced about 20 years ago. And like many other concepts, when you add an adjective to an idea, the idea gets diluted. But eventually, what happens is, since we are the developing and they are the developed people who give you these concepts, we tend to accept them and start repeating it as some kind of an ideal goal. I can give you many examples. Look at the word sustainable development. We spent nights and days in the conference halls of Geneva and New York to fight the word sustainable. Because when you add sustainable to development, the idea of growth is completely lost. The emphasis is shifted from development to sustainability. And who is the West to tell us how to have sustainable development? India has practiced sustainable development all its life. The Kerala model of development that we talk about. Amartya Sen and Jagdish Bhagwati have been fighting over it for some time. If something which we had in our development strategy all our lives was sustainability. Which other country in the world turns your rubber tires into chappals? Which other country in the world use newspapers to pack your vegetables even today? I can give you hundreds of these examples. Still the West is telling you to have sustainable development, and we repeat it now as though it is the holy word from the Bible itself. Similarly, human security. What is human security? Why not just security? Why say human development? Why not say development? So there is a set of these concepts which have been given to us in order either to deny you something or to say to you that the developed world also has its own problems, in order to make themselves feel that they are not being unjust to the rest of the world. And the word good governance, these two words fall in that category. During the decolonization period, when we are asking for independence, when we are fighting for freedom, Asia, Africa and Latin America, they said, you are not yet ready for independence. You cannot govern yourself. You are tribals. You have the caste system. You have all these glorious problems in the developing world, Asia, Africa and Latin America. And why do you want to be independent? And after we became independent, the concept of good governance was adopted by the World Bank and the IMF, making it a conditionality for assistance to developing countries. So we fought this again, saying that good governance is not a monopoly of the developed world. Down to hear what the people were talking about him. The poor man had to throw his wife away into the forest as a result of that. That's another story. But what it shows is that there was always emphasis on self-government, on democracy, on the pulse of the people in the Indian tradition. So we do not need to be told that good governance is necessary. In fact, if you ask me, I would say there is either governance or no governance. There is no good or bad governance, because what does governance mean? Governance does not mean authority. It does not mean dictatorship. It means welfare of the people. If you speak in, because Mr. Sreenivasan spoke about the corporate world. If we speak about the governmental administration, it goes without saying that governance of any kind, if it has to be proper governance, it has to focus on the welfare of the people. We all heard about Kautilya, the Arthashastra, the main precepts of India's government and diplomacy, everything. And Kautilya is often referred to as the Machiavelli of the East. But what does he say when he speaks about governance? What is his fundamental concept? He says that happiness of the people is the happiness of the king. You don't need any other definition of governance. If our political leaders or masters had thought of governance as Kautilya had thought, then there would have been proper governance or good governance or whatever in the country. Because their happiness has to be the happiness of the people. Kautilya was not speaking of a police state. He was speaking of a welfare state when he said that. And in modern times, who else but Mahatma Gandhi, who stressed social justice as the most significant aspect of any governance. And later, Pandit Nehru, when he adopted a socialist approach, a socialist philosophy towards development, he too was talking of a welfare society. What else was planning? Other than keeping the resources available, the low resources available to you, for the best of the largest number of people. Mahatma Gandhi spoke about the Antyodaya, up to this the last man. He gave us this talisman: when you do anything in your life, before you do it, think of the poorest Indian you have ever seen in your life. And think whether what you are going to do now will in any way alleviate the problems of that particular human being. So we do not have to be told about good governance. We do not have to be told that these countries cannot develop unless they establish the practices of the Western countries. We fought very hard in the UN to demonstrate to them that there are good practices in developing countries. Because they think that we are still experimenting with democracy. They still think that we are emerging nation. India is emerging after 5,000 years. Indus Valley civilization. All civilizations have died and gone, but the Indus Valley civilization lives again even today. So one of the recent recognition of our chief minister by the United Nations, unfortunately it got muddled up with the solar eclipse and so on. But that was a very significant event internationally, and I wrote about it. But unfortunately they called me Chandi's angel for that. I didn't say that because I am Chandi's angel. But because to me, it was a recognition that there are democratic practices in countries like India which could be a model to the world. Which other administrator, politician, prime minister, president can you say has ever gone down to the people as he has done? Maybe some godmen and godwomen do that. But for a political leader, for a democratic leader to be in touch with the people directly, he may have done it in a demonstrative way, but and the recognition by the United Nations that this is a practice which is worth emulating by the world. I think we ought to have been more proud than we were when this particular thing happened. And what is our record? Poverty alleviation. Haven't we succeeded to a great extent? Equity and access to education. Right to education. Right to information. Affordable health care. To come to the most modern, most recent, the food security bill. And even the Aadhaar card. All these are measures which ought to make each one of us proud. And all these have been aimed at welfare of the people. So the growth of India, the economic development of India, is not to be measured in terms of employability, employment rates, on the basis of just economic indices, but side by side, together with economic development and growth, we have given attention to the welfare aspects of the development of people. And that is where good governance comes. But if I stop here, I would have given you an incomplete story. I was surprised of all these gentlemen who spoke before me did not mention the word corruption even once. Yes, I know. My brother told me no negative words. But we have to recognize the reality of India. And what is it that stands in the way? I would mention just 2 or 3 things. One is corruption. The other is inefficiency. The third is lethargy about change. And the fourth, of course, is deterioration of moral values. So we need to reset our mindset on all these issues. Corruption is a very good excuse for political leaders and even for us to say it is a global phenomenon. There is nothing you can do about it. I had the privilege to chair the United Nations Conference on the Convention Against Corruption in Vienna some years ago. India has recently signed the convention. We had some many interesting stories when we debated the Corruption Convention. One funny story I must tell you. This is the story about the degree of corruption. Acceptable, unacceptable. So this is a story of a minister from Kenya. He was invited by his Italian counterpart for a dinner. And the Kenyan minister was astonished at the opulence of the place. What fantastic food, what fantastic place. So he was rather jealous of his Italian counterpart. And I called him aside, asked him, what is the secret of this? How did you acquire so much wealth? The Italian minister said, come with me. So he took him to the corner of the flat and said, look, out there, do you see a huge industrial complex cum hotel? He said, yes, what about it? He said, I made 10% of that. Oh, good. And he took him to the other corner of the flat and said, do you see a huge bridge there? He said, yes, what about that? I made 10% of that. So our Kenyan minister was now wise. So he knew what to do. So he went back home, and 5 years later he invited the Italian minister to visit Kenya. And he was much richer than the Italian minister. The whole place was fantastic. So the Italian minister asked him, did you follow my advice? He said, yes, come, look there. He said, look, do you see that huge complex with, shopping mall and all that? The Italian minister says, but I don't see anything. He said, I took 100%. So only that's the difference. We have learned these lessons from them. And it is a global phenomenon. But if you look at India itself, when did we become so corrupt as we are today? I would say it is in my own lifetime. Because a few years ago, Indian administrative service officers were always considered to be non-corrupt. Foreign service is still non-corrupt because nobody offers us any bribes. The foreign service has nothing to offer. No? So I can honestly say nobody offered me a bribe, I never took one. But the bureaucracy has become corrupt. And has the bureaucracy become corrupt, they have to have a nexus with the politicians so that they have to have a cover. So the nexus with the politician and the bureaucracy together has created this new degree of corruption in this country. The policeman taking 10 rupees was accepted. But when it comes to, how much was it? I cannot even imagine that figure of the 2G spectrum. Some lakhs and lakhs crores. And I believe in US dollars it was something like $40 billion or something. Half a dozen countries of the world do not have GNP of $40 billion. And that is the level of corruption that we have reached. And we still have the gumption to go about saying that this is the wrong calculation, or this is the wrong assessment, or some other excuse of that kind. So, with that old tradition that we have, and the kind of record that we have in the last 67 years, I think we ought to think whether we can go back to a time when we treated the joy of the king as the joy of the people. And lastly, what is the answer? I think the answer lies in education. Now that I'm in education, I'm thinking about it all the time. We need to bring about a complete transformation in education. In fact, I have made a prediction that in the next 10 years, education in India will change more than it did in the last 100 years. If it doesn't, it should. Because we are told about the demographic dividend. We're told about the young country that India is going to be. I would add to that, India would be one of the 6 countries of the world which will determine the future of this globe. Given all those opportunities and challenges, are we giving our children the kind of education we ought to give? I just leave that thought to you and conclude, and thank you very much for inviting me.